Hey there, Fearless. This is Matt. Welcome to another video on the Fearless games. I'm going to do something a little bit different today. I was originally going to be doing a Black Templar lore primer to go with my Orc lore primer, but I decided to put that off for a little bit because I want to discuss something that's not necessarily more important, but something that's potentially a little bit more useful to everyone in the hobby. You may have heard me mention at some point during one of our episodes that I spent about 3 years as an art major when I was in college, which is true. I spent about 3 years trying to learn how to be an artist. Excuse me. And I gave that up for various reasons, but that's not important. What is important is that I came away with a lot of knowledge that ends up being pretty useful for this hobby. But the hilarious part is I haven't been putting it to use, and that's because I guess I just wasn't thinking of painting little plastic mans as art. So what I'm going to do is, because of this Legends of War thing that we're doing, I'm going to sort of take it as an opportunity to reteach myself how to paint. And as a result, I'm going to be doing a series of videos that I like to call Back to Basics, where I will discuss various aspects of the hobby and sort of, while reteaching myself, teach you. So at this point, I'm just going to cut to the chase, and we're going to be discussing today the color wheel. You'll notice that there's a color wheel up on the screen already. You won't be seeing my face in this video, which is probably better for you anyway. So yeah, I'm just going to get right down to basics. The color wheel I have on the screen isn't the only color wheel out there. In fact, you can just Google it up and you'll find dozens of different color wheels. I mentioned in one of our episodes of Touching Base that you can buy one. Just Google it. Honestly, you don't need to buy it. You just Google it up. You'll find the one that works for you. But this one I chose because it's fairly easy to explain to somebody who may have never seen one before, and I just like the way it's laid out. So, without further ado, I'm just going to get into it. Now, on this color wheel, right in the middle here, like a little pie split into 3 pieces, you're going to see the 3 primary colors. The 3 primary colors are blue, yellow, and red. If you're colorblind, you won't recognize them. If you're colorblind, you're not painting models. If you're colorblind, why are you watching/listening to this video? The 3 primary colors are literally the building blocks of art. They are used in various combinations to create literally every color on the spectrum. There's not a color on the spectrum that cannot be made using these 3 primary colors. In fact, there's not a color on the spectrum that doesn't use any of them. It all comes back down to red, blue, and yellow. As a result, they're very important. You'll note that next to them in a sort of ring around that little pie are what I call the 3 secondary colors, which are green, purple, and orange. Green is made from blue and yellow. Orange is made from red and yellow, and purple is made from blue and red. This is something that I feel like everybody learned in kindergarten, but maybe you forgot it, maybe you didn't learn it, maybe you weren't paying attention that day, maybe you were sick that day. So, those 3 secondary colors are the sort of broader parts of the spectrum that will be made from each individual primary color. And you'll notice that beyond each secondary color is a gradient of different shades of that particular color, ranging from, say, if you look just beyond the purple, that very blue sort of purple that doesn't really look entirely purple, to that very red sort of purple that's almost like a magenta, and all the colors in between. That's where this particular color wheel falls a little bit short, in that it doesn't show you that many extra shades of purple or orange or green. There's So many shades. There's hundreds of shades of these colors. I mean, just look at any rack of Games Workshop paints, and you'll see like 7 different reds. 4 to 10 different blues, a dozen different yellows and browns. So really, you can just imagine that if you only ever buy 3 shades of paint and really work on diligently learning how to create the varying shades of everything else, that's all you'll ever need. Now, of course, that's not necessarily convenient. It's not necessarily easy. So I can't fault someone for buying a specific shade of yellow, or a specific shade of orange, let's say, or a specific shade of yellow, because you can create something that's like a yellow ochre by adding just a little bit of red to it. I can't fault you for that, and I won't fault you for that. We all do it. It's much easier than sitting and mixing colors for an hour before you decide what to put on your model. But it's important to know these things because... sorry about that, I'm back. I was being called by my mother. So where was I? Yes. Those colors are, important. Another thing the color wheel is very useful for is figuring out your contrasts. Now, contrast is something that's very important in painting a model because contrast helps things pop. You'll notice that, your varying Space Marines will have color schemes like a Blood Angel Assault Marine will have red armor and a yellow helmet. Now, those 2 colors don't necessarily look pretty next to one another, but they stand out next to one another. And standing out is something that your models are going to want to do to an extent. So, those 3 primary colors contrast each other heavily. Blue contrasts yellow, yellow contrasts red contrasts blue. Any color that it's next to, it's going to contrast with pretty heavily. But then you have something called complementary contrasts. And those are things where they're going to contrast each other and they're going to stand out, but they're going to stand out because they look so darn good. And you can figure out what those are with the color wheel by looking at what's on the opposite end. For example, if you look at yellow, it's on the opposite end from purple. Yellow and purple, as it turns out, are complementary contrasts. When you put yellow and purple next to one another, they're going to look really nice. It's going to be a nice combination of color. It's going to be, it's going to stand out because of how good it looks. A great example of purple-yellow contrast being used to really good effect, if you saw Real Steel, Noisy Boy. Noisy Boy was one of the coolest-looking robots in that movie, and part of it was because his paint job was purple-yellow contrast. As well, you've got green-red contrast. What does everyone think about with green-red contrast? Christmas. But another thing that you'll notice is roses. Look at a rose. Yeah, the actual flower and petals of a rose are beautiful, but it's next to that green stem. And that's what helps it really stand out, is that contrast between the two that you just can't imagine having anything but those two together. The third major complementary contrast is blue-orange. Blue-orange is a little sneakier. You don't notice it as often because it's not necessarily used as often, but look at recent movie posters. I swear to you, look at recent movie posters and you'll find blue-yellow contrast everywhere. It was a Harry Potter, Hunger Games. I think it was on Iron Man's poster somewhere. But really, take a look at any time you see like a heavy blue, you're gonna see heavy orange somewhere in there as either shades or highlights. And that's because it catches the eye. And you're gonna want your models to catch the eye. So if you're painting something in blue, consider throwing a little bit of orange trim in there. And that outer wheel, you're gonna spot anything on the opposite end from one another are going to be your complementary contrasts. If you look at the very specific shade of blue-green, you're gonna look across and you're gonna get that almost fiery orange, because you're gonna have more of the red in there than the blue, and that's how it works. Where was I going with this? Right. Now, there's only 3 colors that aren't on this color wheel. Brown, black, and white. White isn't on the color wheel because, well, you can't mix white with colors. White isn't really technically a color as much as it's a pigment. It's the absence of color, as it were. so you can't really get it through mixing. White is something you're just going to have to bite the bullet and buy. White is also very handy if you're trying to make a color a little bit lighter without having to add more yellow to it because that hasn't been working, or if something just got too muddy and you gotta brighten it up a bit, or if you're just trying to make a color paler, that's how you're gonna get those specific colors, by adding a little bit of white here and there. That's something you're gonna have to experiment with because it's not on the color wheel. Black and brown, however, also aren't really on this color wheel, but you can use the 3 primary colors to make black and brown. To make brown, you just add blue to an orange. I know it sounds crazy, but you add blue to orange and you will get brown. I think you'd probably also get it if you added yellow to purple or red to green. In fact, now that I'm looking at the color wheel again, yes, I do remember. If you add 2 colors that are complementary to one another together, like mixing them together, you're going to get a brown. You'll get different shades of brown every time, but you'll get a brown. Then black can be made by combining the 3 primary colors in theoretically equal amounts. Now, depending on the colors of blue, red, and yellow you get, if you get like a yellow ochre, alizarin crimson, and just cyan blue, you might have to add them in varying, in slightly different ratios, because those aren't necessarily the base, primary color of just yellow. But eventually you'll get that black. This is not the easiest thing. It is not the quickest thing. It is not the most convenient thing. In fact, every time I ever had to do it, it was a headache. It was a headache and a half. So what I'm going to tell you right now is don't mix your black. Just buy black. Buy some Chaos Black. It's one of the better blacks I've ever spotted. Chaos Black, Mars Black is a good one. But yeah, just buy your blacks. It's easier, and I don't know anybody who can fault you for it. Even if you're going for a Golden Demon Award, just go ahead and buy your black. I mean, it's just going to save you that much more time, that much more headache, that you will be able to then allocate to more advanced techniques, like non-metallic metals, or object source lighting, shading and highlighting. So yeah, that's pretty much the best I can do as far as explaining the color wheel. It helps you keep an eye on your gradients. It helps you figure out what's a good, shade to a highlight. You're not gonna, shade a yellow highlight with purple. I mean, sure, I don't think there's anybody out there who would have done that, but it helps you keep track of, a dark orange is a good thing for a bright yellow for shading. So, just keep an eye on that. Find a color wheel that works for you. You don't even necessarily have to have it on you, but it might be nice. Your painting station might just have one on the wall, so you can always look up and go, right. It can help you plan out your painting scheme. If you plan on doing, Emperor's Children, looking up at that color wheel and going, right, the complementary contrast is yellow, then you might, have a little yellow trim on your guys, which I'm sure you could have figured out on your own, but it'll help. I promise you, it will help. So yeah, color wheel is important, color contrasts are important, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope I was some help to you guys, and if you have any questions, any comments, any additional advice for other people, please, by all means, leave them down in the comments, or hit us up, with a private message, and we'll address it, either in a video or in that message. If you have any requests for things you want to try and learn, by all means, ask us, and we'll get around to it as soon as we can. I know next video for Back to Basics, I'm going to be doing shades and light to sort of help people figure out how to do shadowing properly, because I've seen some pretty questionable shading jobs in the past. So I hope to hear from you, and I hope you guys stay tuned. And that's everything. Thank you for watching, guys, and we'll see you again on Fearless Games.